Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's segment on ACT Prep. Tonight we will start the science portion of the ACT. After we go over a little bit of math, we're going to finish that up. And then tonight and Friday night, we will finish up the science portion of the test. And then next Tuesday, when we meet, we will talk about writing. And then we will be done with the course. So again, just a little reminder that we'll be meeting tonight and Friday night at 6 o'clock. We will be talking about the science portion of the ACT. And then next week we will be discussing the writing, and then we will be done. So I would appreciate any feedback you can give me on this course, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you would like to see different, what was helpful, what was not helpful. This is my first time doing the course too, so I really appreciate any feedback you can give me. So we are going to start off tonight by talking about the last math set that we did for practice these past few days. So I'm going to open that up, and then we will move on to science and talk a little bit about the science and what to expect on the test. Okay, so this math set, again, there were a few problems in here that were definitely a little tricky, I thought, just because they required quite a few steps. You know, don't get thrown if it's taking you too long. Stop it and come back to it. Just because it's a lot of steps doesn't necessarily mean it's hard, but it is time consuming. So you want to make sure, like I said, you give yourself plenty of time to get to as many questions as you can, because there might be some really simple ones at the end, and you don't want to miss out on those. So again, just a reminder that the directions here are the same as they are for every math test. So we won't bother going over those today, but it is good to just familiarize yourself with those so that you don't have to spend time reading the directions when you actually take the ACT. That'll save you some time. So the directions are the same, so we will just kind of move right along today to the problems. So question number 1 for set 5 asks, Mrs. Hernandez began her math class by saying, I'm thinking of 5 numbers such that their mean is equal to their median. If 4 of the numbers are 14, 8, 16, and 14, what is the 5th number? What is the 5th number that Ms. Hernandez is thinking of? So we need, first of all, to know what mean and median are. We did talk about that a few sessions ago, what mean, median, and mode meant. So the mean is the average, and the median is the middle. When you line them up in order from least to greatest, what number or numbers are in the middle, and what the mean is the average. So if you added them all up and divided by how many numbers you would have, that would give you the mean or the average. So what I did first was I'm saying, okay, there's 5 numbers. Let's add them up and see. If we line these numbers up, we have 8, 14, 14, and 16. And then another number is going to come somewhere in there. Chances are that 14 is going to be our middle number, because there's 2 14s and they're right in the middle of 8 and 16. So there's a good chance that that middle number is going to be 14. So if we line them up with 14 in the middle, 8, 14, 14, and 16, which one is going to give us the mean of 14? Okay. So what I did was I kind of looked at some of the answers and I said, well, let's plug in something, or let's see if we add one more number to give us an average, what would that average be? So if we multiply 5 by 14, because that's the average, or that's what we're looking for here, we would get I'm sorry, what we would want to get is 70. Okay, so we're going to add 4 numbers plus one more number to get 70. So our number that we're trying to get total is 70. Then when we have 8, 14, 14, and 16, let's add those up. That gives us 52. So we're going to do 70 minus 52, and that gives us 18. So our answer here is 18. We're going to say 18 is the average. When we add up all 5 numbers, divide by 5. So our average is 18, and that would make sure the mean is 14. So then we would have 8, 14, 14, 16, 18. So that middle number there is 14. So the mean, 14, the median, 14. So we want the mean to be 14. That's how we got 70. Then when we added up 8, 14, 14, and 16, we got 52. We subtracted that from 70, and that gave us 18. That was the missing number there that we would have to add so that our average was 14 and the median was 14. So the answer there is E. Okay, so here we have a graphing problem with a hyperbola. And kind of, you look at it, you say, oh my gosh, this looks like a huge problem. But really, they're just asking one question. It's really one step. The question is, the graph of a certain hyperbola, y equals hx, is shown in the standard xy coordinate plane below. So among the following graphs, which best represents y equals negative hx? So they're saying which one represents making the h negative? And the answer there is F. It's just going to be the original graph reflected across the x-axis. So the answer there would be F. So that's all that's asking you to do. So it kind of looks like a lot because they're throwing a lot of graphs at you, but they're just asking which one would represent if H was negative HX. Okay. Number 3, so this is one of those geometry problems where you have to prove something and you have different steps that you take to prove what they're asking you to prove. So the question asks in the figure below, angle H is equal to angle F, E, and G. And I'm sorry, angle H is equal to angle F. E, G, and I are collinear, and G is the midpoint of FH. Okay, so those are some things right there that they give us. And what I did was I drew my own graph and I plugged in all the information right away. So I kind of drew where the equal angles are. Any information that they give you, you just want to plot it down right away because that will kind of help you figure out what information you have and what information you still need. To prove that HI and FE given the conditions stated above, that these two are equal, given the conditions stated above, which of the following is a logical order for the 5 steps in the table below? Okay, so here are the statements and the reasons, and they want to know which order should we put them in. So what I did was I kind of looked at what they gave us and went from there. I kind of separated these 2 triangles and drew my own 2 triangles separately. And then I have an angle and then a side and then an angle that were equivalent. Hold on, we're getting a message here. When will class start? Okay. Somebody just asked, when will class start? Are you not able to see me or hear me right now? Oh. Okay, hold on just a second. Looks like something's not working here. Okay. It says that I'm broadcasting, but if you can't see me or hear me, oops, it's not what we want here. Okay. Oh no, what did I do here? Oh. Okay, hold on just a second. Let's see what happened here. I think we Okay, let's see what we got. Live now, okay. It's saying that it's live now. See if I can get this up here, if this does anything. Okay. It's not letting me view this. Okay, hold on. For some reason, it's not coming out. I can't see what your comment is. I apologize profusely. Let's see. The screen is in my way for my user chat and I can't see what the comment says. I apologize. Let's see if it's not letting me. Move this so I can't see what the comment says here. Well, let me keep going. And then just please send me a message if you guys are not getting this class. And hopefully it's working. It says I'm broadcasting, so I just want to make sure you guys can hear me, and I apologize about that. So if you're not hearing me or seeing something, please let me know. Send me another message. I cannot read the message that I just got, so I apologize for that. But I'll keep an eye on it and see if you send me another message. So I'm going to move on. If you can't see something or hear something, just send me another message, and I'll try my best to figure it out. Okay, so we left off, we were talking about the reasons that we have here to prove that these two lines are going to be equal. So what we are going to do is actually prove that the two triangles are equal. And then with that, we can do, it's going to be angle, side, angle. If you remember, side, angle, side, 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 angle, side, angle. It just can't be angle, side, side. And that's an easy one to remember because it spells another word. So that's how, you can always remember that's not a way that you can prove two triangles are equal. So anyway, so let's look at the information that they give us here. And they're going to tell us that we're going to have two angles that are equal, HGI and FGE. And then side HG is equal to side FG. And then we have angles GHI is equal to GFE. So the order that we want to go in here, we're going to look at our choices, and look, they all start with choice 1. So, so that kind of makes it easy. So we know this is going to be our very first statement. The midpoint of a line segment divides the segments into two congruent segments. So because they told us that this is the midpoint, we can prove that this here is equal to this here. So there's our two sides that are equal for our two triangles. Now it says vertical angle. Okay, now we're looking, they all start with 2, except one starts with 4 and one starts with 5. Vertical angles are congruent. Definition of vertical angles or corresponding parts of corresponding triangles are congruent. It's a good chance that one's probably going to be last. So let's come back to that. Now we have either vertical angles are congruent or definition of vertical angles. We're going to first define vertical angles and then say that they're congruent. So it's going to be 1, 4, 2, okay, and now 3, angle side angle congruence theorem. That's our angle side angle. And then finally, corresponding parts of corresponding triangles are congruent. So we proved here that the two triangles are congruent. These two triangles are congruent with angle side angle. So now we can say that the other side is congruent because corresponding parts are congruent for two congruent triangles. This probably would take you a little bit of time, you know, but again, it's not a difficult problem, especially if this is something you've just recently done in geometry. But, you know, it's a lot of reading and kind of looking at the steps and stuff. So again, if this isn't one that you're crazy about, I would circle it and come back to it just so you don't waste a ton of time on a problem like that. Okay. But maybe this is your cup of tea. And if you like this kind of geometry, then, then go for it. Okay, number 4, each of the variables t, w, x, y, and z represents different positive real numbers. Given the equation below, which of the 4 variables w, x, y, and z necessarily has the greatest value? So you can kind of just look at it this way and say, okay, they're all equal to t. Which one of these numbers is the greatest value? If all of the answers are going to be the same, then the number with the greatest value has to be the number multiplied by the smallest value to give you the equal, you know, to give you the same number as the rest of them. So that's just kind of, you know, you're looking at it and you can say, you know, you don't need to get your calculator out or anything. Just say if all the answers are going to be the same, then if I'm looking for the biggest variable, it's going to be multiplied by the smallest number. So that's going to be J, Z. JZ? The answer J for Z. Okay, which of the following is equivalent to f over k plus k? Sorry, let me get my tablet out here because I'm having a hard time reading it up close. Tiny numbers. So which of the following is equivalent to 5 over k plus 3 over k plus 5? So what we're going to do here is, because we're adding, we need to find a common denominator, even though we're dealing with a lot of variables here. So what we want to do, we have k on one side and a k plus 5 on the other side. So to get the common denominator, we have to multiply those two. And whatever you do to one side, you do to the other side. So we're going to multiply this whole thing, top and bottom, by k plus 5. And then we're going to multiply this whole thing, top and bottom, by just k. So when we do that, then we get 5k plus 25 on top over k squared plus 5k plus k squared plus 3k when we multiply this side by k over k squared plus 5k when we multiply down here by k. Now we can add. So our denominator is going to be k squared plus 5k. And on the top, when we add those, we're just going to combine like terms. So we have 5k plus 25 plus k squared plus 3k. So our like terms there are 5k and 3k. So when we add those together, we could get k squared plus 8k plus 25 over k squared plus 5k. And then that's the same as if we pulled out a k squared here. And that's going to give us e. So really the trick there was finding the common denominator, which means we have to multiply this whole thing by k plus 5 and this whole thing by k. And then adding, finding our common denominator and then adding the fractions. Combining like terms, that's another trick. Okay, 6 is talking about a matrix matrix, and the 2x1 and B2 are the cost per pounds of bok choy, Chinese green, at market 1 and market 2 respectively. R1 and R2 are the cost per pound of rice flour at these two markets respectively. In the following matrix products, what does Q represent? So they want to know, what is this here? What is that telling us? What information? And the answer for this one is K, the total cost of half a pound of rice flour at market 1 and half a pound of rice flour at market 2. So the Q is actually representing these two here. The P represents here the bok choy. The Q represents the rice flour, but it's half, right, because we're multiplying it by 0.5 over here. So it's going to be the total cost of half a pound of rice flour at market 1 here and half a pound of rice flour at market 2. Okay, so that's what that Q is telling us. It's the second set of information in the matrix, which is the rice flour. That's what Q represents. All right, another diagram. The two diagrams below show a circle of a radius 1 inch with shaded sectors of angle x for two different values of x. One of the following is the graph on the standard xy coordinate plane of the area y of the shaded sector with angle x squared for all the values of x between 0 and 360. Which is that graph? So they're just asking which one of these represents that information up here. And we have to know the area of the sector of a circle, that formula, and that is x over 360 pi r squared. And then we're going to plug in that information. So they tell us that the radius is 1, so we can plug that in for r. So then we're just going to have x over 360 pi 1 squared, which is 1. So then we have x over 360 pi. And to get x by itself, which is what we're looking for, then we would just divide pi by 360 to get that x by itself. So it's going to be pi over 360. Now that's going to be positive, so the linear function with a positive slope, since x over 360 is greater than 0, will graph as a line. So that's going to give us the line, which is A, right here. Okay. So the trick to this one is knowing that area of a sector of a circle, x over 360 pi r squared. So that's the key there. All of these have like one little trick that you need to know. And then the rest of it seems to fall into place. But sometimes you can get stuck on that. It makes it very difficult. So again, if you didn't know that formula and you had no clue at all, then I would suggest just guessing and moving on. If you think you might know the formula, but you're not sure, circle it and come back to it if you think you have a chance of getting it. But don't waste too much time if it's taking you too long. Okay, 8. If hx equals x squared plus x, so let me make sure I'm getting this right, x cubed plus x, and gx equals 2x plus 3, then what is the function of gh2? So we're doing functions here, which are pretty easy. It's just you got to go in order, right? You start inside and work your way out. So that's all we're going to do here. We're going to start inside and work our way out. So let's start first with the 2, the h2. And we're going to just plug that 2 in for x. So x cubed plus x is going to become 2 cubed plus 2, which is 8 plus 2, which is 10. Now we're going to plug that 10 in for the function for g, and that gives us 2 times 10. We're going to just plug that in for x. 2 times 10 plus 3, which is 23. So our answer there is K. So the trick here is just starting in and working your way out using the number that they give you. Okay, 9. In the figure below, points A and B are on opposite banks of a small stream, here and here. Point C is on the same bank of the stream as point B and approximately 18 meters from B. The measure of CBA is 45 degrees and the measure of BAC is 60 degrees. Okay, which of the following expressions gives the approximate distance in meters between points A and B? And then they give us some information. They say for triangle PQR, where PQ and R are the lengths of the sides opposite PQ angles, PQR respectively, sine of angle P over P is equal to sine of angle Q over Q is equal to sine of angle R over R. So basically, they're kind of giving us some information that we can plug in this information to solve. We're just going to plug it into this little formula that they give us right here. So what that means is, first of all, we have to find this third angle. And we know that there's 180 degrees in a triangle. So we have 45, 60, and when we add those up and subtract them from 180, we get 75. So this angle here is going to be 75. So they want to know between points A and B. So we're going to do sine of 75 over 18, right, because this angle goes with this side here, is equal to sine of 60 over AB, because this is the side we're looking for. And then we're just going to cross multiply and solve. So AB is equal to 18 sine 60 over sine 75 when we cross multiply. And that's as far as we can get. So it's going to be E. So really, they're asking us to use this formula, plug in this information. The only thing we really needed to find first is this angle. Just always remember there's 180 degrees in that angle, or in a triangle. So we know that's 75. And then plug in your sides and your angles into this formula here. Okay. A few more to go, and then we'll move on to science. All right, 10 says each side of the smaller square in the figure below is x inches long, and each side of the larger square is c inches longer than the side of the smaller square. The area of the larger square is how many square inches greater than the area of the smaller square? Okay, so we're going to figure out first the area of the smaller square is side times side, or x times x. So the area of the smaller square is going to be x squared. Now the area of the larger square is side, which is x plus c, times side, which is x plus c. So it's going to be x plus c squared. So what we want to do then is multiply that out. So we have x plus c times x plus c, and that gives us x squared plus 2x plus c squared when we just factor that out. And then what we're going to do is do that minus the area of the smaller square. So we have x squared plus 2xc plus c squared minus x squared, because we're doing this whole area here minus this area, x squared. And when we do that, that just gets rid of the x squareds, and we're just left with 2xc plus c squared, which is k. Okay, so the trick there was, I guess, multiplying out the x plus c squared and then knowing to subtract your x squared. So you're finding this one and then subtracting. Okay, question 11 asks a cube with edges 1/2 inch long as shown below. What is the length in inches of a diagonal that runs from one corner of the cube to the opposite corner? Okay, so what I did was I kind of labeled all these so I would know what I'm dealing with, what sides, just to make it less confusing. So what we want to do first, just a second here. Okay, so we have the length of the diagonal that runs from one corner of the cube to the opposite corner. So what I did, I kind of, if you want to look at the answer too, it kind of tells you here, you know, you can draw P's and S's. They did P's, R's, and S's to kind of help you label. So PR squared, going across right here, is equal to PS squared, this side right here, plus SR squared, this side right here. Okay, so that gives us 1/2 squared, because we know this is 1/2 inch, plus 1/2 squared, because this is 1/2 inch. And then we have XR squared right here, going across that way is PR squared plus XP squared. So this thing, this part right here, squared, which we just found out, x squared, 1/2 x, I'm sorry, 1/2 squared plus 1/2 squared, and then this squared, which is also 1/2 squared. So we have 1/2 squared plus 1/2 squared plus 1/2 squared equals 3/4. So since xr squared is 3/4, xr is just the square root of 3/4, which is the square root of 3/2. So that is E. So we want to find this one first, this diagonal down here, from this corner to this corner. So we're going to multiply this times this, 1/2 times 1/2. Then we need to find this part. So we're going to multiply this diagonal times this. So we have 1/2, 1/2, 1/2, and then take the square root. So that gives us radical 3/2. Okay, and the last question here is a little bit of trig. There will be just a few trig questions, only about 4. So, so the answer for 12, which of the following, we're dealing with sine and cosecant. Okay, wherever this is defined, so which of the following is equal to this whenever this is defined? So it's a defined number. So what we're going to do here is the answer is going to be -1 because sine, I'm sorry, the correct answer is -1. Cosecant, the negative of cosecant is 1 over negative sine theta. So to take that negative out, it would become -1. So the answer there is going to be F. Okay, if there's no questions on math, we will start with some science. A lot of you guys had some questions or concerns, I guess. This was kind of an area that people really wanted to make sure we went over. So hopefully I will do a thorough job in going through all this. Science, another big part of the science, like all the seems like all the parts of the ACT that we've talked about, is the timing. It definitely takes a significant amount of time to get through some of these passages, and then you have to do corresponding questions. The questions are not difficult. Some of the passages take a little while to get through and really, go through the information. So we'll talk about how to do that today, and then Friday we will go over some of the specifics on the actual passages. Okay, let's see. Okay, so. Okay, the science reasoning test is the 4th test on the ACT. It is followed by the optional essay. You aren't required to know any science for this section. Everything you will need to know to answer the questions is right there in the passages. So again, like we talked about with the English and the reading, they're not going to make you call on any outside information. Everything is right there in the passage. However, it does help to be a little familiar with some science terms, just things you might need to know about experiments in general, that sort of thing. But the answers come directly from the science passages. So it's all there. So again, don't use outside information if they don't if it's not in the passage, okay? If you know a lot about geological rocks, but the information that you know doesn't necessarily come from the passage, don't use it. It's a reading comprehension test in essence. Even though it's science-based, it's still reading comprehension, and everything that they're asking comes right from the passage. Okay. There are 3 types of passages on the science test: data representation, research summaries, and conflicting viewpoints. So you'll have 3 different types, and you will be able to tell what you're reading. And we'll go over these more in detail, which one's which. But so there's 3 types to kind of look out for: data representation, research, and conflicting viewpoints. You will have 7 passages and 40 questions to answer in 35 minutes. So again, seems like a lot because you have to read and do 40 questions. But not all the questions are going to take you a long time. And the passages might not take you that long either. Some of them are a little more dense than others, but there's also a lot of graphs and charts to look at too. So that might save you time if you're good at that sort of thing. You are not allowed to use a calculator on the science test, but you won't need one. So unlike the math where you can do it without a calculator, but it's not recommended, here on the science you're not allowed to use a calculator at all, but there's no math that would require you to need one. Okay, the science reasoning test will cover content similar to that of science courses taught in 7th through 12th grade. So this content includes biology, which is cell biology, zoology, ecology, and genetics, chemistry, acids and bases, properties of matter, organic chemistry, earth science, geology, meteorology, astronomy, and oceanography, and physics, mechanics, thermodynamics, electromagnetism. So if you are a junior right now and you're kind of panicking saying, oh my gosh, I haven't had physics yet, remember what we just said. You don't need any outside information to do well on these passages. So it's not going to be anything extremely difficult either. That's college level. So it obviously helps if you've had the sciences, just to be familiar with some terms or whatnot, but everything you will need to know is on the test. If you haven't had physics yet or chemistry yet, don't worry, you won't need any outside information. Okay, there will be 3 data representation passages with 15 corresponding questions. These passages will provide you with tables, graphs, charts, or other illustrations, and they will test your ability to understand and interpret information given. So basically the data representation passages are asking you to look at data and how it's represented, tables, graphs, that sort of thing, charts, pictures, and you'll be tested on how to interpret that information. There will be 3 research summaries passages with 18 corresponding questions. These passages describe several experiments and their results. The questions will test whether you can follow and interpret the procedures and their results. So this is basically dealing with experiments, and they're going to tell you what the people did in the experiment, what the results were, and ask you to answer questions based on these passages, based on the experiments and their results. And finally, there will be 1 conflicting viewpoints passage with 7 corresponding questions. So these passages usually have 2 or 3 conflicting viewpoints on a research hypothesis, like how did the continents come to exist? And you will be asked about the conflict and the evidence supporting each view. So you'll have 2 or 3 different scientists, called the battling scientists, and they will have different ideas on one issue, whether it's how did the dinosaurs become extinct, how did the continents come to take their shape, something like that. And you won't be asked your opinion. It does not matter what you think. They'll just give you 2 or 3 different types of opinion, 2 different viewpoints, and then ask you questions. How are they the same? How are they different? What scientists would agree with this? What scientists would agree with that? That sort of thing. Oops, let's go back. Understanding questions will test your ability to find information or paraphrase parts of the passage. So these types of questions will just ask you to find information. They usually require you to focus on a single sentence, paragraph, or chart in the passage. You may be required to determine a value on the chart. So this is just basically pulling information out of the passage, not going too deep. So it's just look at this chart, answer this question, look at this paragraph, and use that to answer the question. Analysis questions will ask for a deeper understanding of the information in the passage. You may be required to make a prediction or locate a relationship between 2 different pieces of information. So analysis, again, we're getting a little deeper now. They might ask you to make a prediction or look at 2 things and figure out a relationship between 2 different parts of an experiment or 2 different things that they're talking about in the passage. Generalization questions require you to look at the overall picture. You may be asked to connect events in the passage to events not described in the passage and how they would affect one another. So generalization, just looking at the big picture. Again, kind of like what we talked about with the reading passages too. Generalization is just the main idea, the big picture. Make a broad generalization or broad assumption after reading this passage. Okay, so we will do a few more slides and then we will save the rest for Friday. We'll talk a little bit just on how to tackle the science test. So we just talked about what the science test is. Again, the biggest part of the science test, I think, is the time. You're going to have a lot of information given in these passages. The questions are not difficult, but it does take a little while to cipher through the information. So the first thing you might want to do is to scan the passage to identify the passage type first. Remember, we talked about 3 different types of passages: the research summaries, data representation, and conflicting viewpoints. So if you aren't sure, and the obvious one is conflicting viewpoints, because that'll say scientist 1 and scientist 2, so you'll know right off the bat that that's that kind of a passage. But if you're not sure, count the number of questions. The data passages have 5 questions that go with them. The research summaries have 6 questions that go with them, and the scientists have 7 questions. So if you're not sure, just look at the questions, how many, say, okay, there's 5 questions, this is data. So this is going to ask me to interpret different types of data in different methods, charts, graphs, that sort of thing. Research summaries, okay, there's 6 questions, so I know this is going to be about an experiment, how they did it, how it turned out, the variables, the conditions, that sort of thing. So it just kind of helps to know what you're going to be looking for in this passage before you even start it. Don't be afraid to underline key information or write down notes in the margins. Use your books. And especially for science, circle things that you think are important or put a little star next to it. Underline a word, a vocabulary type word that you think might be important. Okay. Try to identify each type of questions. We just talked about the 3 types of questions too. The understanding questions, which is just drawing information right out of the passage, whether it's, how much of something in a chart or what a word meant in a paragraph. Analysis requires you to dig a little deeper. Generalization, look at the whole picture. And this will help you to zero in on the information you need. As on all the sections of the ACT, use the process of elimination to get rid of answers you know are definitely incorrect. And there might be a few in there that okay, I didn't read anything about this, or this has nothing to do with this experiment I just read, and use that to eliminate an answer you know is incorrect. Okay, don't forget to pace yourself. Time is precious on the science test. If a question seems too hard or too long, move on, like we've said all along through the SAT. And it goes for the science test too. And the science is at the very end, unless you're doing the writing. So at this point you're going to be a little burned out. You're going to be ready to be done. But just knowing this is the last one might help get you through it. Just pace yourself, and if it seems like the question is too hard, move on. However, that being said, it's like the reading passages where the certain amount of questions, the 5 questions that correspond with data go with that particular passage. So you're not going to want to circle one, go read a few other science passages and come back to that one because it might be confusing. So try and answer all of those questions that go with that passage before you move on to the next passage, because it would just get too confusing to come back to one that you did first after doing several other science passages. So again, like we talked about with some previous sections, kind of treat each one like a little mini test. Try and do as many questions as you can, and if there's something you just don't know, skip it and guess. Okay. So I think we're going to stop there for today, and we'll do a few more, I think. Just want to make sure we have enough time next week too, or on Friday. Okay, we'll talk about data representation real quickly. So the data representation passages. There are always 3 data representation passages on the ACT. Each has 5 corresponding questions for you to answer. So we just talked about that's how you know data representation. It's only got 5 questions. Instead of reading the passage in detail, scan the charts or graphs, and then you can refer back to the charts as you answer the questions, and it will help you save time. So this one is more, it's visual. There's a lot of things to look at, a lot of information that's given in picture form or chart form. So it is a little easier to scan it, whereas when it's all text, it might be harder to scan. You really have to read. But here you can kind of go back and forth too between the questions. Look at the questions, then go back and look at the chart and find the information that you need. So instead of reading everything in detail for these types of passages, it might help to kind of scan it, look at the questions, and then go back to the charts and graphs and find the information that you need. When looking at a graph, table, or chart, you will want to pay attention to several things. First, you want to find the variables. Time, temperature, number of animals or plants. These are the things that might change during the representation. Next, determine how they are measured. They measured in pounds, percentages, liters. It might be important because they might, in a question, ask you in a different measurement. You might have to convert. Probably not, but it's just important to take all that information in. There may be a few different types of graphs on the ACT in addition to a typical bar graph. So bar graph, that's your most basic. That's going to be the bars going up and down, and it's easy to see which one's the highest and which one's the lowest, or the most and the least. Coordinate graphs have points on the XY axis that represent a value, the independent X and the dependent Y variables. Coordinate graphs can be linear, which is a line, curved, which has a curve, scatter diagrams, which are just scattered or scatter plot diagrams, sometimes they're called too, where it's just dots scattered, and then flat lines, which just go straight across. Okay. So linear, like we said, just means that the points follow a straight line. The relationship is positive if the line increases along the x-axis. In other words, it goes like that. A decrease means the relationship is negative. So if it slopes down like that, it's negative along the x-axis. For graphs with curves, the amount y changes with each change in the x. The amount y changes with each change in x is different at different points in the graph. So it will look more like a curve. Okay, scatter diagrams will have points scattered across the graph. There will be a line that runs through the center of the graph, and if you took the average of all the points on the graph, it would form this straight line. And then flat lines tell you there is not a relationship between the variables. The two elements have no effect on each other. So if it's just a flat line, there's no relationship. Okay. Okay. We will stop here for today, and we'll save the last of these slides for Friday. And what I'd also like you guys to do is do the first 2 passages for the science portion on the ACT website. It'll be interesting to see what you think. It's definitely, they're not difficult, but it is a lot of information to take in, while you're doing these questions. So kind of remember what we talked about today. See if you can figure out what type of passage it is, and see if you can also figure out what type of questions when you're looking at the questions, what type of questions they are too. So for Friday, we'll meet again at 6 o'clock. We'll finish up science, and we'll do the 2 science passages. If you could also do the quiz between now and then. I know that's not a lot of time. We're kind of pressed for time here. I'm trying to get everything done before the baby comes next week. So we'll try and get that quiz done, and then the 2 science passages. We will finish up the slides for science, and then we will talk about the 2 passages. And then next week we will finish up with the writing. Some of you may not be interested in doing the writing on the ACT either, because that is optional. However, I would recommend doing it in case you're not sure where you're going to apply for colleges. You'd have to be awful to have to go back and take the ACT all over again just to get that writing portion in. So I suggest just doing it while you do everything else, and we'll talk about that on Tuesday. So we'll finish up science on Friday at 6 o'clock, and then we'll have our last class next Tuesday at 6. And again, I really appreciate any emails if you have any questions, comments about today or anything during the course. Your feedback is greatly appreciated. I'm sorry about the little glitch we had in the beginning there. I don't think there was a problem after that, so everything ran smoothly. And anything, let me know before Friday. If not, I will see you back here at 6 o'clock, and we will finish up science. Thank you so much, and have a great night.